This is the High-Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I'm Eric Balkman from the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the Better Sports Network, and the FFPC. You can connect with me on X at Eric Balkman and the FFPC on X at FFPC. Before we get into the show, I want to remind everyone that you can get a listeners-only 10% discount to RotoViz by using the code RVRadio2025. That's RVRadio 2025. Your subscription gives you unlimited access to all of the RotoViz content and tools, and it supports the podcast channel as well. Now, without further ado, here's the latest episode of the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome into this season 10 season finale of the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown. My name is Eric Balkman, at Eric Balkman on the X. Pleased to be hitting you up one more time for this fantasy football season. I'll give you an update on the show as far as the off-season schedule goes for this program coming up at the end of the show. Now, I do want to make you aware that the FFPC Divisional Playoff Challenge, aka the Playoff Challenge 2, is live right now at myffpc.com. This is the last contest we will have with a six-figure grand prize this season. It's pretty simple. There are 8 teams left in the playoffs. You get to put together an 8-team lineup. One player per team, double points in the big game. You're not fading anybody. You have to include one player off every team, one quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, and 2 flexes. Am I getting that right? 1, 2, 3. Yes, that's right. Eight players, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receiver, tight end, and 2 flexes. So make sure you're registering now. $200 entry fee is all it is, and that gets you eligible for a $100,000 grand prize. You can also join the $35 edition of this competition as well. $35 still gets you eligible for a $25,000 grand prize. That's over at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Remember to like this video, subscribe to this channel, comment on the video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, and get notified each and every time we go live. I'll give you the update on the schedule for the live shows this week on the FFPC family of podcasts. That's coming up later on in the show. Before we get into the end of the show, we have to get to the meat of the show, the best part of the show, the part of the show where I bring on our guest. Ladies and gentlemen, this guy has won 10, count them, 10 high-stakes leagues in the FFPC over the course of his career. He has cashed in the contest we're going to be focusing on tonight. I shouldn't say cash. He's finished in the top 50 the last 2 years of this competition. So he'll give us some tips on that. He almost made it to the mountaintop 4 short years ago as he took 2nd place overall in the FFPC Main Event. Please welcome into the program the guy you follow on X at Fortitude_FFB. He is Ken Ford. Ken, how are you this evening? Thank you so much for joining me.
Doing awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Eric.
It's good to have you on. It's been a few years. I feel like, I don't know what it was, but like this season of the High Stakes Lowdown, I got a bunch of people on this program that had not been on in years, and it's sort of like this was like the reunion season of it, and we're reuniting with you tonight, Ken. Very excited to have you aboard. How did the fantasy season in 2025 treat you?
Well, I didn't win the big money, but yeah, it was all right. I did better in my dynasty leagues this year than I did in my redraft league, but I did well enough. You'll see me again next year.
Yeah, that's all it is, right? All of us are just trying to win enough to pay for next year's entries. That's all it is.
That's right. That's my minimum goal every year.
Yes, exactly. Nail on the head. Ken, so the reason I wanted to have you on tonight is I think we talk a lot about the FFPC Playoff Challenge that locked last week. Last weekend for the wild card, and why wouldn't we? It's a $500,000 grand prize. It's so much fun. It's 12-man lineups for a 14-team playoff. But we don't talk enough about this contest, and I think it's really fun because this is like Ironman football, right? 8 players, that's it. And you got to deal with it for 3 weekends, divisional playoff, conference championships, and the Super Bowl. And, you don't have to mess around with them. There's no, moving players in and out. Once you set it, that's it. But I wanted to talk to you tonight about sort of like your success in this to kick things off. Top 50 in this playoff challenge the last 2 years. You've done well in it other years as well. I think that the thing everybody who's tuning in tonight wants to know, they have read so much and listened to so many podcasts about last week's competition. How does strategy change? How do you shift your focus? What's the biggest differences in putting together a winning lineup in this contest as opposed to the one that locked last weekend?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was the fewer number of teams and smaller player pool. It becomes even more important to try to find that right player or two, right? That's not the chalk player, right? That one that has that potential, has that upside, and combining that with chalk, right? The reality is there's certain players you just got to have, right? If you don't have them, you're probably not going to win. Mm-hmm. So I think, it really comes down to, from a strategy standpoint, I don't alter some of the things I'm looking at. I'm looking at matchups. I'm looking at, how did players perform last week, right? The teams that played last week. Obviously, we got 2 teams coming off bye, so they're more rested and probably a little healthier. So that factors in, thinking of those players. But it's really identify that 1 or 2 players on every team that's not the chalk play. Mm-hmm. You're willing to stick in a lineup, and if you can nail two of those, and nail those chalk players, you got a shot.
Do you think that that's the right ratio for people filling out multiple lineups? Is 6 of them, 6 of the players are going to be sort of like the widely owned, obvious plays, and then you just got to hit 2 of the quote unquote weird ones, 2 of the outliers? Is that the right ratio that people should be following?
I mean, it's worked for me thus far. Obviously, I haven't won the whole thing yet, so maybe I need to add a 3rd one in there. I don't know. But it's real easy to overthink these games, right? And I think if you can kind of force yourself to match those chalk players with some smart alternate plays, and there's some things that get presented to you. You got some injuries that happened last week. You have a few players that may have opportunity to really shine this week. So I think those players are there. It's just a matter of matching those up with the right chalk players. So, there's no guarantee chalk players are going to hit, right? It happens every week of the NFL season. You see chalk plays that just don't pan out, right? And so that's part of it now.
I want to spend a few minutes talking about each one of these teams, and obviously we might deviate from the talking point of each one that I've come up with here tonight. But I want to start things off with that Bills-Broncos game that kicks off 4:30 on Saturday afternoon, when lineups will lock for this. Buffalo is visiting Denver here. And I have to believe that with many people thinking that the de facto AFC championship game was last week between Buffalo and Jacksonville, and the fact that the Bills came out ahead, thanks to Josh Allen putting the team on his back with the longest tush push I've ever seen in my life, in part because of Allen, they're advancing. And they opened up as a 1.5 point favorite in Denver. They're now 1.5 point dog. But I have to believe, knowing everybody has to pick a Buffalo Bill and knowing that the Bills got past the Jaguars last week, I have to believe that the Josh Allen ownership percentage is going to be fairly high. Is that going to affect the way that you choose your bill? Are you going to go with Allen and eat that chalk? Or will you go with James Cook? Would you go with the tight end here for an ultra pivot? How does this, again, projected high ownership percentage of Josh Allen, at least in my opinion, how does that affect which bill you're choosing, Ken?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think Josh Allen is going to be super heavily owned. He is that offense, right? And he's proven it time and time again, no matter the matchup, that he can get you he can reach his ceiling, even against the toughest defenses, right? He just finds a way. Having said that, this is a tough mountain to climb this week. And, I can see potentially a pivot to Shakir, right? Given their state of their wide receivers and the fact that they really got no one else who can catch the ball, right? I think they're down to 3 healthy receivers, and one of those guys has been benched at least 3 or 4 times this season, right?
Yeah.
So, so Shakir is somebody that, if you want to pivot off of Allen, that's a potential, right? I think he's going to get a lot of volume, but he's got a super tough matchup, right? James Cook, same thing, right? He obviously had a super successful season, but it's a tough matchup. And, he struggled a bit against tough defenses, right? So for me, the only pivot I'm probably looking at off of him is probably Shakir. He's one of those guys I think has an opportunity to reach a ceiling that can really help you. That is not a chalk play.
The team that they're facing, Denver, to me, does not have a whole lot of standout players. I was talking with Harshal Sheth on this program last week, Ken, about the FFPC 500K playoff challenge. And he said, I think we kind of settled on like Sutton, and that was about it. Now, if you believe Denver is going to get to the Super Bowl, then I think you could take a longer look at Bo Nix. I have very little faith in RJ Harvey, which kind of makes me believe that Sutton is probably the right play. Denver also has, one of the best defenses in pro football this year. So I think we have to look at that. And then, of course, the fact that they are the number 1 seed means that they will get, if they win this game, 2 games at Mile High. Maybe the kicker is a play here too, because of that thin air. I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of average options on this team, maybe one good one. How are you handling the Broncos and the other pepper in the gumbo here? They're the number 1 seed. Like we're so used to having the Chiefs be the number 1 seed, and we're talking about Mahomes and Kelsey and whatever. And now we're looking at Denver, and it's like we're kind of shrugging our shoulders. Or maybe you're not. Maybe you're more dialed into this, Ken.
The funny thing is Sutton, to me, he's a safe play, right? I don't like the ceiling of Sutton. He hasn't really all season, right? He's a 4 play. Right, he doesn't really have much of a ceiling. I think Nix is the play off of Denver, and that's obviously, if you think they're going to go beyond this round and potentially all the way, that could be a great play. Nix has shown he's got a really high ceiling. He's super inconsistent, right? He also has a low floor, so it's risky. But in this game, you got to take some risk. And I think Nix is actually one of the better pivots to me.
He does use his legs too. And I think that can be very desirable when you consider how many rushing touchdowns he had. And for those people who don't want to eat the Josh Allen chalk, then Bo Nix is perhaps the pivot that you make here. And then you can utilize James Cook, or as you said, Ken, perhaps Khalil Shakir as well. So that's the Bills-Broncos. The evening game on Saturday night got a little bit more interesting and a little bit more difficult for the Niners as they lost George Kittle to a torn Achilles. Now, they already did not have Brandon Ayuk. They hadn't had him all season, but certainly having another option in this passing game would be desirable right now. Knowing that there's no Kittle in this contest, knowing the tough defense they're going up against, Ken, you have Jawan Jennings, who apparently is throwing touchdowns now too. You have Ricky Pearsall on this team. Jake Tonjes, who was very quiet after Kittle went down, but we've seen him have really, really good games when Kittle missed earlier this season. How does the fact that that there's going to be no Kittle in this game affect how you're choosing your 49er?
Yeah, Tonjes, I think the trick with him is, he wasn't playing with Brock Purdy, right, when he had those good games, right? So that's one thing. If you look at the games where he's played with Brock Purdy, he didn't really produce much. So I'm not really looking at Tonjes. Frankly, San Francisco is a team I'm probably fading as much as I can. As hard as that is to say with Christian McCaffrey, we see what Seattle did to them just a couple of weeks ago, right? And it was not pretty. I think this could get ugly for San Francisco. So I'm not real keen on really any of the 49ers players. The only guy I would put in a lineup just because I got to pick somebody is going to be McCaffrey, because obviously he has that high ceiling, right? So I don't think the 49ers have a pivot that I'm interested in, not against this team. And I'm not expecting them to advance beyond this week, frankly.
The biggest point spread of the week is this game. The Seahawks are 7.5-point favorites in this game. The other ones sit at 1.5, 3, and 3.5. I wonder if because of the fact that you need to fill 2 running back slots and 2 flex spots, do you think McCaffrey is actually going to be more owned than Josh Allen this week?
He might be, right? Because when you think of running backs, who are you going to put in a running back? And if you're not willing to pivot to somebody else on San Francisco, right? He's probably going to fill one of those spots, at least for me.
I look at all 4 of these teams, and we'll get back into this game in a second, but you look at the backfields for these teams. Like, obviously you have James Cook in Buffalo, you have Christian McCaffrey in San Francisco, but then you have Swift and Monangai in Chicago. You have Williams and Corum in Los Angeles, Henderson and Stevenson in New England, Marks and Chubb in Houston, Walker and Charbonnet in Seattle. Denver has RJ Harvey and I mean a cast of characters there, Jaleel McLaughlin or whatever. Buffalo and San Francisco, to me, Ken, are the only 2 teams that really have this dominant alpha lion share of the backfield touches player on their team. And I think, the fact that maybe Allen isn't going to be as owned as I thought, considering, that the high volume that Cook could see in the postseason.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think Cook is definitely going to be highly owned. I think he's probably going to be the number 2. I think Allen will be the first choice for a lot of folks, but I think Cook will be up there. He's just got an incredibly difficult matchup, right? I think Houston's going to really focus on shutting him down and make Josh Allen beat them, which, that doesn't always work out as he's beaten a lot of teams. But I think that's, they've got that defense that they're strong front to back on the defense, right? They can really play with anybody. So, it's hard. Cook is a hard one for me to go with, but he's definitely a pivot from Allen for sure. But I could definitely see a lot of McCaffrey and Cook, right, as the 2 running backs.
Oh yeah,
the 2 bell cows, right, that are left.
I wonder if like Pearsall would be like the ultra pivot here, right? Because if you don't want to use McCaffrey, potentially you could use Tonjes, I guess. But I think a lot of people would pivot to Jennings unless you believe the 49ers are going to somehow get to the Super Bowl and then you use Purdy. But Pearsall he didn't play this past week in the postseason, hasn't played since week 17. And like there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be out on him. But he did get on a limited practice today. So, I mean, that's good. I wonder if like we'll see people switching their lineups as the week goes on, Ken. If Pearsall keeps practicing, I wonder if he's actually going to be in a few more lineups than we might expect. That's a Saturday night game, so we won't get inactives prior to lineup block for this, but we should have a fairly good idea early Saturday afternoon whether Pearsall's playing or not.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, if he were healthier and he's demonstrated that he was healthier, then I'd have some interest there, because I think a healthy Pearsall definitely has the ceiling potential, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he played week 17. He didn't look right. I'm not sure he's going to be right now. And against this defense, he's definitely a flyer. I'm sure some folks will take a flyer on him. But for me, I'm looking for pivots that have, I think have a ceiling that is attainable. And I'm just not sure he's that guy.
Moving on to Seattle, the team that San Francisco is playing. Shout out to Fantasy Mojo, fantasymojo.com, at Fantasy Mojo on the X. That's Darren Armani's website. He's the godfather of the Pros versus Joe's Challenge. Anytime we cite ADP or ownership, it's due to his website. And I'm looking at it right now, Ken, in the world famous playoff challenge that locked last week in the $200 contest. Jackson Smith and Jigbo was the Seattle choice for 88% of FFPC players playing in this competition. If I look further and I extrapolate that down from Smith and Jigba, I'm looking at the next highest owned player was from Seattle was actually the kicker, Jason Myers at 3%. The Seahawks defense also at 3%. And God, what's the other? I mean, I guess the highest owned. And then, I'm sorry. This is gonna blow you away. At 1%, was a Seattle fade. So more people did not even pick a Seahawk than picked Shaheed, Cooper Kupp. I misspoke. I'm sorry. Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker each had 2% ownership, just ahead of the fade. Darnold failed to get a full percent as well. Shaheed and Cooper Kupp were owned on a combined 3 rosters out of the thousands that were in this competition, 7,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
3 rosters for Shaheed and Kupp. Now, so 2% I think is the percentage I'm looking for, that I want to, or those players I want to talk about here. Charbonnet and Walker.
Yeah.
Obviously no kickers and defenses in this competition. Can you make any kind of a case to go with one of those Seahawks running backs? I mean, if you do, you're playing a little bit of roulette because you don't know which one is going to stand out over the course of the next 3 weeks. And you can't have Smith and Jigba on your team as well. Is this an open and shut case for you on which Seahawk to use?
I don't think it's an open and shut case. I think you can definitely make an argument for the running backs. I mean, certainly this week, right? The matchup is good from a running back standpoint, right? You know, you can definitely run on the 49ers. I mean, the 49ers defense is a mess right now, right? Mm-hmm. So you can put points up on them both through the air and on the ground. If you figure, if the story plays out that Seattle's defense dominates their offense, you got to think that Seattle is going to be running the ball, right? A lot. They may not have to throw the ball much. So that could hurt JSN. But you said it, right? Which running back do you pick for this week, and then the next week and the week after that, assuming they go all the way? It's definitely roulette. But there's potential there for one of those guys. I think for me, Charbonnet has been the guy recently that has looked better, and I think you can definitely argue. Make a case for either of those guys, maybe a little stronger case for Charbonnet.
That's where I'm at with Charbonnet. Now I'm just seeing this for the first time. I probably should have looked at this closer, but I didn't. Kenneth Walker started all 17 games for the Seahawks this year, which maybe that means something, maybe it doesn't. He did have only 37 more carries than Charbonnet this year. However, he had he had 300 more rushing yards than Charbonnet. Now, if we look at the catches on the season, this surprised me as well. 31 catches for Kenneth Walker III. Only 20 for Charbonnet, which to me that doesn't seem right. That Walker would be the pass catcher out of the two. Neither one of them is really a pass catcher, but of the two, Walker had more. And then you get to touchdowns. On the season, you are looking at neither one of these guys catching a touchdown. And then rushing touchdowns this year, Charbonnet more than doubled Kenneth Walker. Walker gets in the end zone 5 times. Charbonnet gets in the end zone 12 times. Now, touchdowns are not a sticky stat, but in a 3-week sprint like this, and the fact that Charbonnet is getting the carries inside the 5, rarely do I say, hey, give me the guy that's just the banger that's pounding these touchdowns at the end over the guy who had 300 more rushing yards, over the guy that had 11 more catches. But I think Ken, and you said it, I think I lean Charbonnet here a little bit too.
Yeah, and I think that last stat you gave is perhaps the tiebreaker between the two of them. And Charbonnet's definitely been their guy inside the red zone and when they get down near the goal line. So for me, it's not a sticky stat season long, but when you get into this stage of the season at the playoffs, coaches tend to try to go with what works, right? And that obviously is something that's worked for them, right? So I think Charbonnet would be my first pivot, but it's an arguable pivot, right, with both of those guys for sure.
AJ Barner, I'll bring this up. Steven Yergalos in the chat room right now. He could be the Niners Seahawks game version of Christian Kirk. Now, Barner this season has had some standout games. 7 for 53 against Tampa. He went 10 for 70 against the Rams, and he's kind of been a steady Eddie this season. He's gotten a handful of touchdowns, about a half dozen touchdowns on the year. In the games against the Niners this season, the first game of the year, he had 1 catch for no yards. The final game of the season, he had 2 catches for 14 yards in that game. So I don't know. I mean, yes, Barner is a pivot. It's tight end premium. I could see it, but I think I'm with you. If I'm not going JSN, I think Charbonnet is probably the guy, definitely getting more than 2% ownership in this contest as opposed to the last one. For sure.
I like Barner. In Dynasty, Barner's really interesting to me because I think he's kind of a surprise this year, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody thought the rookie that they drafted, Arroyo, might be the guy, but Barner looks like he's one of those sneaky tight ends that just is there every year. He has that potential. I don't know that I'd pivot to him in this game, but if you're willing to take a flyer, you could do worse, I think.
He's one of those guys. Barner will be entering his 3rd year in the NFL next year. And I wonder if he's one of those guys, not necessarily, and maybe Ken, you like him a little bit more than me. He might not be one of those guys I ever want to trust in Dynasty. However, he could be that guy that does enough that the team likes enough that keeps Arroyo from being anything in fantasy, right? And by the way, like Seattle, I think they'd be happy with that. With the way that the NFL is kind of shifting to more 2 tight end sets. We saw so many 2 tight end sets this season. Barner, a tandem of Barner and Arroyo with JSN moving all around it, and you'll have Charbonnet and probably another running back next year with Kenneth Walker expected to move on in free agency. That's a good recipe for Sam Darnold to limit his ability or limit his potential for ruining the game for you with bad decisions, bad passes, or whatever. If you keep everything in that first 10 yards, past the line of scrimmage, I think he can do some damage.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And they have the defense to play that way as well.
The defense, right? That's their strength, right? Is the defense, right? The offense just got to score enough points so the defense can keep them, keep the opponent, from winning the game. And Sam Darnold, you don't want him doing too much.
I'll say this too. I could be misspeaking here, but I'll just bring this up regarding the Seahawks defense. Seattle gets the number 1 seed this year. They have made the Pro Bowl. They have made the Super Bowl every single year they've gotten the number 1 seed. And Denver, I think, I can't remember what their track record is of getting to the Super Bowl when they have the 1 seed, but it's pretty good. And the last time these 2 teams met in the Super Bowl was the year that Seattle's defense absolutely shredded Peyton Manning, and the Seahawks destroyed the Broncos in that game. And the guy who ended up winning the playoff challenge that year in the FFPC had the Seahawks defense. So that's another one to think about if you want to do a super duper pivot and skip the running backs and JSN. Seattle's defense isn't bad either. Yeah. Okay, let's move on here, Ken, to the Sunday games here. We'll lead things off with Houston, who just came away with the victory against Pittsburgh on Monday Night Football last night. We will not know the concussion protocol status for Nico Collins by the time lineups lock. I am betting, because he got concussed on Monday night, that he will not be playing in this game, which could be the only game for the Texans. In the last game, it could be only one game in this particular challenge for the Texans. What's the most prudent way to choose your Houston Texan, knowing that Woody Marks had a great game, Nick Chubb didn't have a bad game, Christian Kirk blew up, and then you also have Jaden Higgins, who could be in that Collins role for a full game, getting reps with the ones all week. Certainly you didn't like what you saw from Stroud, fumbling 5. How do you fumble 5 times in a postseason game and still win by 24?
Right.
Just blew me away. And then obviously the Texans defense comes into play, and Kaimi Fairbairn, I don't think there's a hotter kicker in the NFL at the end of the season as well. So they're, again, similar to the Broncos, a lot of average or maybe a couple of good options here. Not really a great one that I'm seeing.
Yeah, now Houston's a tough one because, to your point, they don't have any real standouts outside of Nico Collins. So with him being out, they haven't. You look at how much the rookie wide receivers played this year, and Higgins has had a few decent games. I think primarily when Collins was out, but they haven't really trusted those rookies, right? You saw it again last week with Xavier Hutchinson, right? Was really the number 2 guy, and when Collins went out, he was the one that got the receptions, right? I think Woody Marks is an interesting play. I think against the Patriots defense, there's some opportunity there. They were very persistent in feeding him the ball in this last game against Pittsburgh. So it shows you they trust him. Chubb, I don't think gets enough volume. He doesn't catch any passes. So I think he's just there to give a break to Marks. So at this point in his career, so I think I like Woody Marks as a possible pivot. I think Higgins could be that guy, right? But the problem is, assuming they get past the Patriots, Collins is likely back, right, the following week, and Higgins just hasn't done much when Collins is playing. So that's the risk, right? That if they go beyond this week, what does he get you the rest of the way?
Yeah.
And then Christian Kirk. Yeah, I'm not sure what to make of Christian Kirk. That where was he all season?
Right. Yes.
Right. So, it's one of those things. I don't generally like to chase points with those kinds of players, but as you know, at the end of the season, sometimes you get that hot hand and you can roll with it for 2-3 weeks, and that's all you need at the end of this. This game is 3 weeks, right? So Kirk is also interesting, right? Especially with Collins out next week. I could see Kirk, but the Patriots aren't going to be surprised by him, right? They saw what he did last week, right? So, Kirk, I think, is an option, but I'm not sure. We may have seen his best game already.
I will say this about Kirk: the thing is with Collins being hurt, Noel, Higgins, Hutchinson, they're all adversely affected by the return of Collins next week. Kirk shouldn't be. Like his role should be the same as it was this week, as it was last week, as it will be in future weeks. And then you have the Houston Texans defense, and bear with me on this. I think that we've talked about, if you believe the Bills are going the whole way, you want to have Josh Allen. If the Broncos, Bo Nix. We'll talk about the Patriots here in a second, but certainly if you think they're going to get through the AFC, you want to have Drake May. I wonder, given Stroud's performance, that if you believe that the Texans are going to get to the Super Bowl, of which there's more than a non-zero chance they do with that defense, maybe the play is actually the defense, because you won't get Collins this week. No matter what injuries happen to Houston, you will have that defense every single week, right? They're gonna find a way to field the defense every week. I wonder if, and it's strange for me to say it out loud, Ken, but what's your take on that? If you are betting on the Texans getting to the Super Bowl, then is the defense actually the proper play? Because that's how they're going to win games, is with that squad.
I don't disagree, but no defenses, right, in this second one. So.
Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. All right, so great point. This is why I have you on, Ken, for catching great things like that. Okay, so we throw that out the window. So you are right. I mean, there is really, Kirk or Woody Marks, right? It's got to be one of those two.
I would say I trust Woody Marks just from a volume standpoint more than I trust Kirk. I think Kirk potentially has a higher upside as he demonstrated, in this past game, right? So. I could definitely argue a pivot to Kirk. I would probably be more likely to pivot to Woody Marks if I was going to go that way. But I wouldn't fault anybody for just maybe Kirk's got the hot hand. Maybe he can ride it for the next couple weeks. Yeah.
And the other thing too, I will say that if you do decide to go with Josh Allen, or if you do decide to go with, the ultra pivot of a non-McCaffrey team, then all of a sudden Woody Merckx looks a lot more appealing for one of your running back slots on the squad as well. They are taking on New England. This will be in the cold Northeast. How do you feel about the Patriots in general this year, about their chances to get to the Super Bowl? And again, another team that has Stephon Diggs, that has Ramondre Stevenson, Trevion Henderson, Hunter Henry. Again, a lot of good options, maybe better, a wider variety of choices, a bigger buffet in New England than maybe in Denver, than maybe in, some of these other Seattle or the teams in San Francisco, some of the teams we've talked about there. So there are some good options here in New England, but it all depends upon how far you think they're getting, Ken.
Yeah, and if you think they're going all the way, then I think Drake May is the play. The challenge with the other players is you've named some good ones there, right? They've all had good games this year, but none of them have had consistently good games, right? It kind of alternates from week to week as to who gets the volume and who gets the points, right? I think Hunter Henry's interesting, obviously in a tight end premium format. He's proven throughout the season that he's somebody that Drake May trusts, right? Especially when they're in a tough game, right? He's gone to him, multiple times, in those really tough games. Houston's a tough play from an offense to, against that defense. But I can argue 4 pivots in this game, right? Either of the running backs, right? Trevion Henderson, he didn't do much last week, but he's got the big play ability. Mm-hmm. It's just that's something you can't predict when that's going to hit. Ramondre Stevenson has surprisingly been very durable and reliable, right? Especially this last few weeks. So I like him as a possible pivot. Stephon Diggs, it's hard to know with him, right? I'm not sure where his headspace is at right now, given all the stuff going on around him off the field. He didn't do a lot last week, but he has shown that he can get those ceiling games as well with Drake May. So I think my favorite pivots in this game are probably Hunter Henry and Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah, Stevenson, another guy that you can plug in that running back slot for sure.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Houston here. Steve G's making a good point. Nobody likes Dalton Schultz and tight end premium for the Texans. And he also said if Nico Collins is out, Jaden Higgins and Dalton Schultz definitely are in play. And he's another guy, I'll bring this up too, with Christian Kirk probably not having his role changing, with Collins coming back seemingly next week if Houston makes it that far. Dalton Schultz is another guy that should not have his role change a whole lot. In fact, it might get better. Now, last night against Pittsburgh, a game that was sort of in doubt until the early fourth quarter, he only gets 3 catches for 12 yards. In fact, you'd have to go back to December 21st against the Raiders when he actually had a double-digit fantasy game. I take that back. Against the Colts, he had 4 for 73. He had 5 for 35 and a touchdown against the Raiders. The week before that, 9 for 76. 8 for 76 and a touchdown in that game as well. He's only gotten 3 touchdowns on the season, but 2 of them have been within the last month. What about Dalton Schultz in a game that you would think that Houston's probably going to have to be throwing the ball in the second half, but maybe not. Maybe I'm being too eager and thinking that New England is going to get out to a big lead in this game. Let's talk about Dalton Schultz here, Ken.
Yeah, and I think that's a good call out. Stole one of my guys that's on my secret list. So Dalton Schultz, since you brought him up, we'll talk about him. So Dalton Schultz, yeah, I agree. I think he's definitely in play as a pivot. I think the Patriots, that's one of, I don't know there's a weak spot for them, but I think they're just average against tight ends. So from a defense standpoint, so I think I think Dalton Schultz has a real good chance to especially with Collins out. Beyond with Collins comes back, I think that does eat into what Schultz can do. But for this week, for sure, I think Schultz is definitely in play.
And if Houston is one and done, you could easily see a 6 for 70 game here for Schultz, as long as Stroud remembers how to hang on to the football. That's the key thing for Houston this game. On to Sunday evening. It is going to be the Rams and the Bears. Let's talk about the Rams first. Puka Nacua. I have to bring this up here because I don't want to misquote myself here. In this game that we had against Carolina this past week, which was right down to the wire, Nacua saw 18 targets in this game. 18 targets. He catches 10 of them for 111 yards and a touchdown. Davante Adams, not to be shown up, he saw 13 targets, but he only caught 5 of them, 72 yards in this game. This is his first game back off the hamstring injury. Williams and Quorum were about even, 13 carries to 11 there. And then you had both of them catching 2 passes as well. And they were both, I think if you look at it, Kyron Williams had 75 total yards. Blake Corum had 58. So they were very, very close between them. And then Stafford, obviously, with the 3-touchdown, 304-yard performance as well. I think that the one guy that stands out here is Nacua. But I am seeing, other than, the JSN play, other than the Drake May play, I am seeing some pretty nice and tasty pivots off of Nacua here. 2 of them in the backfield, and then one with Davante Adams here, Ken.
Yeah, no, I think, well, Nacua is he's in a league of his own right now when it comes to the receiver position. And I've seen no indication that that's going to change, right? I think Stafford is going to keep feeding him the ball. He's the obvious chalk of chalk plays in this. But if you do want to pivot from him, you think you're right. You do have some good options. I think Stafford's a good pivot, right? You're getting that, the benefit of him throwing to Davante Adams and Puka, right, as well as the tight ends. He doesn't give you any running upside. That's the knock on him, right, in this format. And then I think Davante Adams, absolutely, right. He's shown he can have ceiling games with this team. And if somebody does manage to slow down Puka, and that generally means that Davante is the one who's getting that shift right from Puka. So I think Davante is probably my second choice when it comes to a pivot outside of Stafford. The backfield, you have 2 steady guys, right? Either of them can get you points, but I don't know that either of them get you to what you need, right? As a pivot, right, in this game. If it was all one of them, getting the touches, then I'd be more interested. But they've been pretty evenly split here the last few weeks for sure. So that's a tougher pivot for me to those 2 guys. But I can definitely, Stafford and Davante Adams are definitely in play.
Stafford was owned in 11% in the playoff challenge last week, with Nacua hitting 75%. Davante Adams only 5%. I do expect the Stafford Nacua numbers to be a lot closer. I mean, I gotta believe that Adams gets higher than 5% this week, but I don't know. It's not like he re-injured the hamstring. It's not like he did look bad. God, to have 13 targets and only catch 5 of them, that's not great. But he did get over 70 yards, so there is something to be said for that. And I'm with you. I think that it's really, really tough for me to pick Williams or Corum. If you were going to go with one of them, would it be Williams, or would you go with Corum just as the?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think Williams is probably, if you got to pick one of them, Williams is probably the one to go with. I think he has the trust of the team, right, in those tough situations, and he's proven that he can score you touchdowns. So, and that's what you're really hoping for him, right? Is that they get the ball down inside the 2-yard line multiple times in the game, right? And he punches it in.
The only 2 players on the Bears that saw ownership of more than 20% last week were Colston Loveland and DeAndre Swift. Loveland came in at 42%. Swift came in at 23%. Loveland is obviously going to be highly owned. We talked about the tight ends in this competition last week when we had more teams. And it still seemed to like come down to Loveland and Kittle. And now Kittle's out. So you do have the aforementioned Dalton Schultz, who Steven Yergalos just brought up. But then you have Loveland. And then what do you have after that? Kincaid, Schultz, Hunter Henry, okay. But then you have a cavalcade of options with the Rams, with the Broncos, and even certainly with the Bills and maybe the Niners too. So Loveland, I think, is going to be highly owned in this contest. Do you just eat the chalk on him and put him in as your tight end or one of your flexes, or is it Swift, or is it Moore or Luther Burden, somebody like that?
Yeah, I think Loveland is probably one of those chalk plays that you're more than likely going to stick with. The alternatives just don't have the ceiling that he has. I think Schultz and Hunter Henry are two potential pivots from Loveland if you want to differentiate. Maybe Barner. I just worry about the volume that Barner is going to get in his game. But I think it's going to be hard to pivot off of Loveland, given the way he's become a key part of that offense now. If Odunze was out still, then I'd be more interested in pivoting off of Loveland into somebody like Luther Burden. But the problem is now with Odunze back, it really waters down the receivers, and it's really tough to see who from that receiver group is going to stand out, if anybody, right? And then DeAndre Swift, I actually like DeAndre Swift. I think he's another one that you could pivot to off of Loveland. I feel like Loveland's going to be higher owned in this contest than Swift, even more so than in the first one. So I think Swift may be a decent pivot. He's got ceiling. He is competing with Monangai for carries, but he's the more explosive of those guys, and he has. I mean, he's shown it. He's played against some tough defense. You watched that game against Philadelphia, right? He can really get out there and get after it. So, but I think Loveland's going to be tough to pivot from.
Yeah. Over the course of the last 3 games, Ken, Colston Loveland has seen 38 targets in the last 3 games. He has turned those 38 targets into 24 catches for, well over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. It's been crazy that, including the postseason, Colston Loveland had 850 yards, I want to say, and more than a third of that has come in the last 3 games. So he is white hot coming into this. I think you're right about Swift too. If I'm going to pivot off him, or if I'm going to pivot off Loveland, I think Swift would be a decent choice. Given that over the course of the last month of the season, he's sort of like taken away some of the volume that Monangai had taken from him. I think he's taken some of that back. So Swift would make certainly for an interesting play here. And then I think too, Ken, I don't know if we talked about this, but I'm a Packers fan. I live in Wisconsin here, and it was a tough game to watch. And I said after the game, I'm like, God, and I looked it up. This is like the 7th or 8th fourth quarter comeback that the Bears have had this year. Yeah. And I was like, God, maybe it's their season. Maybe this is their year. And not a lot of people are talking about that, but I'll bring it up. And I'll tell you this, as far as picking a Bear, if it is the Bears season, Loveland or Caleb Williams would be interesting if you believe the Bears get by the Rams and then somehow find a way to beat Seattle. I'm assuming Seattle over San Francisco and get to the Super Bowl. It's the quarterback or the tight end here I think could be very interesting. Caleb Williams, I'm going to bring this up right now. Caleb Williams this past week in the playoff challenge was owned in less than 2%. He's going to be owned more here. And if you put your chip in on the Bears, I think Caleb Williams would be a decent choice here, given that they always seem to get down in the fourth quarter and then just go. Caleb Williams goes crazy, piles up all these fantasy points. There are worse decisions to make in life than utilizing Caleb Williams as your quarterback on your team.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I think Caleb Williams, you buy a big bottle of antacid and have it sitting next to you while you're watching the game. But I think Caleb Williams can definitely. You're right. I mean, he's done it now all season. right? They do these comebacks, and he definitely is a guy who seems to thrive under pressure, right? He actually kind of struggles when he's not under pressure.
Yeah, right.
So,
exactly.
yeah, so
Like
it probably means he's thinking too much, probably.
Yeah.
So maybe they just need to run the 2-minute offense the whole game. Yeah, I mean, I like Caleb Williams as a pivot. He's probably one of those more dart throw kind of pivots, but he's definitely got the ceiling to potentially get you there. And he could, certainly this week in this game, it could be a high scoring affair. I'm not sure how he would do against a team like Seattle with that defense, but yeah, I have no argument with somebody wanting to pivot with Caleb Williams. I think that's a good differentiator.
I'm going to ask you 2 more questions. One's a player question, then one's a team question. The player question is this. Is there one must-have for you across these 8 teams? Is there one player that is a must-have in this competition in order to win the 100K, Ken? And then a player that you think is going to be rostered by a lot of people, but not by Ken Ford?
Yeah. I mean, I think Puka's probably the must-have, even though he's the chalkiest of plays, just because I think he's going to continue doing what he's been doing. And to say I'm going to pivot away from that and leave those points, for someone else is just that's a hard one. So I'll probably be right there with everybody else. Puka could have 100% ownership. When it comes to the player that I will grudgingly not roster, it's probably Christian McCaffrey.
I think that go ahead.
Defense. Yeah. Well, that defense, that defense and the way that offense is so banged up, and I think they're going to definitely be trying to feed him the ball as much as they can. But Seattle knows that, right? And they've shown that they can shut him down.
The second part of this, and I don't want you to give anything away here. We talked earlier in the show, Ken, about eating a lot of chalk in this competition, but getting 1 or 2 pivot plays right. If there are 2 pivot plays in this competition, let me phrase that differently. Who are your favorite teams in this competition to create those pivot plays from? Who are your 2 favorite teams? In other words, knowing that you have to have, sort of like the must-haves on 6 of your slots, there's going to be 2 kind of bonus ones you can play around with. Who are your 2 favorite teams in the playoffs to come up with those non-chalky plays?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably Chicago is one of them. I think there's some good opportunity there. I know I said I'd play Puka as probably my lock, but I do like the Rams. I really like the Rams for pivot plays, right? If I can talk myself into setting Puka off to the side, there are some definite strong pivot plays with the Rams. Probably actually the strongest team when it comes to pivot plays in my mind. But you got to set Puka to the side to do it, right? So I don't know. I may talk myself into that. I'll have that conversation over the next couple of days with myself. Other than those 2, I think there are definitely opportunities across all of the teams, right? I think the Patriots have got some good options as well, right? So I think you do have options for pivot plays. It's just really a matter of looking at those pivots, looking at those matchups, and try to match those with the players that are going to get their ceilings, right?
I think that on the surface, this looks fairly easy to just churn out. Okay, I want this guy, boom. And yes, it's supposed to be easy. It should only take a few minutes to submit your lineup. But I think if you dig underneath the surface a little bit, and I think we dug a little bit, I think there's further that we could go. But if you dig under the surface a little bit, when you get into matchups and extrapolating out this tournament, there are certain players that might stand out a little bit more. And I'm talking about the non-obvious plays. There are certain players that could stand out a little bit more.
For sure.
Steve G was talking about Dalton Schultz. We talked about Dalton Schultz. I think that's one of them. I think there's other players like this. And over the course of this week, we're at Tuesday night right now. So we're like basically a little bit less than 4 days, right, before the lineups lock for this. I think people are going to discover a few more of those plays. And like you said, maybe talk themselves out of playing somebody like Puka Nacua in order to try to win this $100,000. Ken, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to, the obvious thing is play more than one team, right? Which I know I'll plug the FFPC, right?
Great sales pitch.
Buy more than one team, right? That's the obvious play that'll gives you that flexibility, right? To be creative.
Right. You have come close to winning this a couple of times. You have come close to winning a big money prize in the FFPC before as well, besides this competition. So, Ken, I wish you all the best. I hope the ball bounces your way, not only this weekend, but during the conference championships and the Super Bowl as well. Thanks so much for hopping on tonight. We will continue to connect with you on X at Forditude_FFB. Thanks for making this a part of your Tuesday evening. Good luck and enjoy the rest of the NFL postseason, my friend.
Thanks so much, Eric. Really appreciate it. Have a good one.
You too. That is Ken Ford, ladies and gentlemen, former 10-time FFPC League winner, runner-up in the 2021 FFPC Main Event, and he's finished in the top 50 in this competition twice in the last 2 years. That will complete our show tonight. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to utilize the stuff that Ken and I were talking about tonight, to your own advantage, sign up now at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. The FFPC Playoff Challenge 2 is live. $100,000 grand prize, $200 to enter, 8-team lineup, quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, tight end, and 2 flexes. And then, of course, we also have a $35 competition that will still pay out $25,000. So if you think your fantasy season's over, not quite yet. Still one more chance to win a huge 6-figure grand prize. Whatever's happened to you over the course of this fantasy season can be rectified and fixed if you win this competition. So take your chance now at myffpc.com. Want to also let you know that the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown is going to go back to its off-season schedule of the first Tuesday of every month. So we will not be weekly anymore until the start of the 2026 season in September. So the first Tuesday of every month, we will have another show, 10 o'clock, same time. So we will be off. What is this? The next 2 weeks, I think it's a 2-week break. Yeah. 2 weeks we'll be off, and then we'll be back at it February 3rd. And then the first Tuesday of every month after that. That's for the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown. Now, this week on FFPC Insider Access on the Better Sports Network, as well as the FFPC socials, you can tune in at 7 o'clock Thursday night. Pat Fitzmaurice from Fantasy Pros and I will be analyzing this competition as well. We'll build a couple of lineups and talk about the latest and greatest going around the NFL and get you set for some best ball drafts. Which will be kicking off with the FFPC here probably in the next. I would say we'll have leagues going off in less than a week, including maybe a new contest. That's all I'm going to say about that. But I would say be paying attention to your FFPC email come next Monday. You might be surprised at what you see in there. So that's Thursday night with Pat Fitzmaurice and myself. Then Friday night, Farrell Elliott and I will be on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour at 10 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be joined with by Brad Taylor, longtime KFFSC player and host on the Vegas Sports Information Network. VSiN's Brad Taylor joins us Friday night to help you out with not only formulating these divisional playoff contest lineups, but maybe helping you out with some picks against the spread, some totals, some props. We'll get into that with Brad on Friday night. So without further ado, for Ken Ford, I'm Eric Balkman. This has been the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown, which will return February 3rd. This channel will go live again at 7 p.m. this Thursday night. Thanks for watching, everybody. Good luck in the FFPC Playoff Challenge 2. Register now at myffpc.com, myffpc.com, and make this the year you cash in that $100K in this contest. Good luck, everybody. May the ball bounce your
Thank you for listening to the High-Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. And thanks to Grapes for our theme music. Please review the podcast on Apple Podcasts under the RotoViz radio feed. It helps us find new listeners. Contact us via email at rotovizradio@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think, and connect with us on X at RotoVizRadio. Remember, you can always support the show by subscribing to RotoViz at a 10% discount using the code RVRadio2025. That's RVRADIO2025 through the NFL Podcast homepage at rotoviz.com/podcast.